So this is the last weekend of this year. At Suncrest, that means at least two things. Number one, it means year-end giving. Jen just kind of mentioned that. Tax incentives and anti-procrastination make this a great time for generosity. And generosity at Suncrest means more people's lives changed. Money makes ministry possible. And we get front row seats to what God is doing, changing people's lives here in St. John and throughout Northwest Indiana, and literally around the globe, in places like Myanmar, Liberia, Colombia, in cities like Paris, New York City, San Francisco. So as the executive pastor here at Suncrest, year-end giving gets me excited. That may be weird to you, but it is actually the truth, and I'm not going to pretend that money doesn't matter, because year-end giving is very cool. It leads to making a difference in people's lives. And if you want to give in 2018, we would love for you to consider how you can partner with Suncrest. You can give online at suncrest.org until Monday at midnight, or in person here until Monday afternoon, December 31st. Last weekend of the year, there's something else that usually means, and that is the message is usually connected to New Year's resolutions. Almost always that's the subject. And that's cool too. If you think about it, that's what we're thinking about anyway. So that's the subject that we're going to connect with. According to Brad Zomick, most of us will make New Year's resolutions, hoping to spark some positive changes in our lives. He says 2019, the most frequently made resolutions, New Year's resolutions, will be the usual: exercise more, lose weight, save more, spend less, get organized, learn a new skill, quit smoking, spend more time with family and friends, and travel. Are you a fan of New Year's resolutions, or do you kind of make fun of them? Do you kind of poke fun at them? There's probably some of each. How many of you are a fan? Raise your hands. Yeah, okay, some. How many kind of poke fun at it? Come on, admit it. It's okay. So you're okay. It's about even, about half and half. The Journal of Clinical Psychology says 54% of us who make New Year's resolutions do not keep them. More than half of us fail miserably when it comes to New Year's resolutions. But listen to this. A study that involved non-resolvers found that 96% of those who have goals in their life but don't make New Year's resolutions fail to achieve their goals, a far bleaker result than those who do make New Year's resolutions. Epic fail. You know what all that tells me? Change is difficult. Change is really hard for us. And we know this, right? But if we get intentional, if we get specific, if we measure the results, positive changes are possible. And so, true to form, tonight's message is related to New Year's resolutions. Today and next week, when Greg returns, you will hear us use numbers to communicate two transformational ideas endorsed by Jesus. Actually, both of these ideas originated with Jesus. And both ideas, if you choose to embrace them, will lead you to forming what we're calling Keystone Habits. Keystone Habits. What's a keystone habit? I'm so glad that you asked. Some habits possess the power to start a chain reaction, changing other habits as they move through an organization or as they shape a person's life. Some habits, in other words, matter more than other habits, actually remaking people, changing people. These keystone habits influence how people work, eat, live, talk, spend. Keystone habits start a process that over time changes everything. Keystone habits say that success does not depend on getting every single thing right, but instead, success relies on identifying a few key priorities and shaping them into powerful levers. These habits that matter most are the ones that, when they start to shift, they dislodge and remake other patterns, and a chain reaction of change, that's the end result. Keystone habits are radical. At first glance, they may strike us as extreme. Keystone habits are powerful. I would say they're sneaky powerful. It would be easy to underestimate their catalytic power to change our lives. Keystone habits are transformational. They make substantial change possible when it really was not possible previously. And because of all of this, Keystone habits are absolutely beautiful. They're amazing. I know this all sounds great, but you're still wondering, Dan, what in the world are you talking about? What are Keystone habits? I don't understand. Here's an example of a Keystone habit that most of us, as parents, tried our best to instill in our kids. You didn't know it, but if you are a mom or a dad, you stressed this Keystone habit with your children. Morning hygiene. When my sons were little, it was not a given that they would brush their teeth. It was not automatic that they would take a bath, later on a shower every day, and shampoo and brush their hair. It was not a foregone conclusion that they would learn to use deodorant, clip their nails, and such. Personal hygiene was a habit that their mom and dad insisted that Caleb and Benjamin embrace. It was not open to discussion or voting. It was not an option to consider. It was mandatory. What is more, as Caleb and Ben got better at brushing well and remembering on their own, we celebrated small wins, good checkups, no cavities. We even celebrated fresh breath. We encouraged and reinforced healthy habits. Every mom and most of the dads in this room, you did this with your kids, didn't you? Now, why did you do that? Well, I want us to list some of the reasons. If teeth don't get brushed and brushed well, maybe even flossed, what happens? Teeth rot. Eating and smiling just are not the same without teeth. If showers get skipped, smells and crud and grossness build, and it's not good. Eventually, without personal hygiene, being around people becomes difficult. Friendships don't happen. Girlfriends, forget about it. Without morning hygiene, you cannot finish school, won't secure a job, cannot dream of getting married. It is likely that you will die early and alone. But if you establish a healthy morning hygiene habit, there's a chain reaction of habits and opportunities that open up for you in wonderful ways. A great life is not guaranteed, but at least you have a shot. And so, we teach our kids to brush their teeth. And it is not so much about what brand of toothpaste they use. It's not even really whether they use a soft toothbrush or a hard toothbrush or an electric toothbrush. They may brush their teeth 2 or 3 or 4 times a day. That's not what matters most. The key habit is brushing their teeth every day. Now, to a 6-year-old boy, that's kind of radical. But it is powerful and transformational, and it is beautiful. It matters, right? A chain reaction of good comes from firmly establishing the habit of healthy morning hygiene. So it's been said that cleanliness is next to godliness. Jesus did not say that, but it has been said by throngs of loving mothers and grandmothers. And today's godliness keystone habit is represented by these numbers: 24-6. 24-6. Sabbath is a keystone habit that our Father in the heavens trains his kids, you and me, to embrace for our own benefit. It's a keystone habit that may seem radical to us at first. Maybe most of us would consider it extreme. But Sabbath is powerful. It's sneaky powerful. We underestimate its catalytic power to change our lives for good. Sabbath is transformational. making meaningful change possible for us when it really was not possible previously. Nearly everything about our lives gets better because of Sabbath. And because of all of this, Sabbath is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. That may not be your perspective right now, at whatever time it is right now, 7 o'clock, Thursday night. But I have prayed that Jesus' idea that Sabbath is a beautiful keystone habit will absolutely change our minds. I have prayed that Sabbath will start a chain reaction in our lives in 2019 that brings extraordinary, beautiful, pervasive changes. What does Jesus say about Sabbath? You may know that Jesus was Jewish, and so Sabbath was a huge deal in his family, in his neighborhood, in his synagogue. Sabbath was a time for rest, for worship, and for family. It was a wonderful day each week, a 24-hour time slot that started on Friday at sunset and went all the way through. It continued through to Saturday at sunset. Sabbath reminded Jews that God created us. Sabbath reinforced the concept of rhythms in life by setting a weekly habit of 6 days to work hard, 24/6, and 1 day to not work at all. On that day, the focus was renewal, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Renewal. But by Jesus' time on earth, Sabbath had been altered and confused in its practice. And so actually, Jesus introduced radical controversy when it came to Sabbath. What Jesus said about Sabbath leads us down a beautiful, divinely designed road, helping us to avoid ditches on both sides. On one side of the road is what we'll call the legalistic ditch. For most of the religious leaders in Jesus' time, the law of Moses was not specific enough. They wanted more legal language and fine print. And so the Talmud and the Mishnah, additional Jewish writings, added details. And the end result was 1,521 different ways that a Jew could break the Sabbath, be guilty of breaking the Sabbath. The legalists said that you could travel 750 yards from your front door. That was what became known as a Sabbath day's journey. And if you walked 751 yards, you broke the Sabbath. If you tied a knot, if a scribe carried a pen, if you killed a flea or a mosquito, if you wore a heavy coat, like most of you, you broke the Sabbath if this had been the Sabbath tonight because you wore a coat. It was exhausting, even ridiculous, but it was all very religious. On several occasions, Jesus confronted the legalists of his day. One time he was walking with his disciples through the grain fields, and it was on the Sabbath, and some of his disciples picked grain and ate it. They were hungry, and they had something to eat. It was right there. The food was right there. A couple Pharisees saw it and said, "That's breaking the law." But Jesus said, "You're off base. That's not what the Sabbath is about." And then he said, "I am Lord of the Sabbath." From there, Jesus went directly to synagogue, and Jesus healed a man's shriveled hand. And that infuriated the religious leaders. They asked him accusingly, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" And according to them, it was not. Injured people were supposed to wait till the next day for doctors to treat them. But Jesus said, "Which of you, if you have a sheep that falls into a pit on the Sabbath, won't reach down and lift it out? People matter so much more than sheep. Therefore, it is lawful," Jesus said, "to heal on the Sabbath." And one of the biographers of Jesus' life, Mark, tells us right then, when he said that. Right then, the Pharisees and the Herodians, Jesus' legalistic religious enemies, began to plan how they would kill Jesus. You see, people in the legalistic ditch lose perspective. That's true when it comes to a variety of topics, not just Sabbath. Externals become the focus, and judging others becomes a preoccupation. The outside trumps pursuing love for God and love for people. Have you ever veered into this ditch, this legalistic ditch? Have you ever focused on externals, on judging people? A few decades later, the Apostle Paul would write to Christ Church about this legalistic ditch. And this is what he said. Do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival or a Sabbath day. He says, these are the shadows of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. Jesus, and Paul for that matter, practiced Sabbath. They celebrated it as a keystone habit that provided healthy rhythm for life. But Jesus avoided the legalistic ditch. He also avoided the dismissive ditch. Jesus avoided the dismissive ditch. Now, this is the ditch that most of us need to pay attention to make sure we avoid it. It's just a guess, but I'm thinking that no one in this room is checking their step counter watches and fitness devices to make sure that they do not walk 751 yards on Saturdays. Probably no one in this room is doing that. Instead, we dismiss Sabbath. Some of us got the idea somewhere along the way that Sabbath is a Jewish thing, an old covenant thing, and that it is irrelevant today. When was the last time you even thought about Sabbath? Some of us veer off the road of Sabbath because we are prone to work too much, neglecting all other parts of the life that God has given to us. One of my mentors said, workaholism is the most respectable of all addictions. But if you don't work to break that habit, it will one day break you. Little boy watched his dad Saturday morning open his laptop and pull out spreadsheets from the office. Dad was settling into work on a project right there at the kitchen table. And the little boy asked, Dad, what are you doing? He said, I had so much work to do at my job this week that I didn't get it all done, so I brought some of it home. The little boy, trying to be helpful, said, Dad, when you go to work on Monday, why don't you ask them to put you in a slower group? Some of us, we do need to slow down. Forbes carried an interview discussing the sacred rhythm of the Sabbath. Listen to what Wayne Mueller, a graduate of Harvard, says about the moral imperative of rest. He says, for every living thing, there is the necessity of dormancy, the deep rhythm of work and rest. When we are traveling at high speed, there is a sense of, he says, undernourishment, because even the good things we are doing don't have time to sink in. We have gotten to the point where the only culturally acceptable reason to stop entirely is when we get sick. I think he's right. In Mark 2:27, Jesus says to us, the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. And then Jesus says, so the Son of Man, speaking of himself, is Lord even of the Sabbath. Sabbath is a Jesus thing. He is Lord of it. He's in charge of it. When he walked on this planet, he modeled how to do it. And this is really important. Jesus gives us the Sabbath for our benefit. It's for us. It's a beautiful gift from Jesus. My guess is you haven't thought about it that way, if you have ever really thought about it. Sometimes around Suncrest, when we talk about Sabbath, we use this shape. It's going to come up here. And a key verse of Scripture from John's narrative to describe the rhythm of life. The rhythm of life. Our lives are designed by our Creator to resemble this semicircle. Jesus' life perfectly modeled this semicircle. John was Jesus' best and closest friend. He worked and lived with Jesus for 3 years. John saw how Jesus modeled Sabbath rest in the rhythm of his life. John witnessed Jesus' daily Sabbath expressed in morning quiet times to pray with his Father in heaven. Sometimes Jesus would go for a walk, and he would get away from everybody else so that he could have quiet time. It was usually in the early morning. John got to see Jesus' sleep patterns. Did you know that Jesus modeled taking naps when he was tired? He did. Jesus could fall asleep just about anywhere. Think about it. In a wood manger. We just kind of celebrated that one. Against a rock. In a boat during a storm. Jesus rested every day. John witnessed Jesus modeling weekly Sabbath. Jesus gathered with other people to worship every week. He participated in the weekly and the seasonal and the annual holy days, the holidays and feasts that recognized our Father in heaven and prompted worship and celebration of what God had done for his people. Jesus took breaks from his work to socialize and eat together with friends at dinner parties and wedding receptions and such. Jesus modeled rest in the rhythm of his life. And Jesus modeled work, too. The gospel narratives do not record the details of Jesus' life from age 13 all the way up to about age 30. But most theologians and historians agree that Jesus most likely spent the majority of his time working as a carpenter, providing for his mother. Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, died when Jesus was young. Providing for his mom and his younger siblings probably involved long hours, sore muscles, splinters, and such. And then John eyewitnessed Jesus from age 30 to age 33, working in the public sector, if you will. He watched Jesus model leadership and conflict management. His work included teaching, healing, a decent amount of travel, and a lot of stress. Jesus dealt with weird and wonderful fans, partners, co-workers, and with energized competitors and enemies. Think about this. Whether your job is primarily blue collar or white collar, Jesus experienced it. He knows what it's like. In Jesus' life, there was a rhythm of work and rest. Work and rest, back and forth, in healthy rhythms, daily, weekly, seasonally, and annually. After years to reflect on Jesus' example, John wrote about work and rest, referencing an illustration Jesus had used to teach to his disciples. Jesus had said, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me, stays connected to me, he will bear much fruit. But apart from me, you can do nothing." Jesus was saying, in the rhythm of your life, stay connected to me. Abide in me. Rest in me. Sabbath will help you do that. And Jesus says, I will supply you with everything that you need to go work, to be strong and healthy, to be fruitful, to produce and accomplish everything that I have for you to do. That all sounds pretty good until we read that last sentence. What did Jesus say? Apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Do you believe what Jesus said? Or do you quietly think to yourself, you know what? I can do a lot of things on my own. When Jesus spoke that sentence to his disciples, I don't think that he was referencing, he could have been, but I don't think that he was referencing the truth that without Jesus, the one who created me and sustains me, I literally cannot take another breath. Instead, I think Jesus was saying that there's nothing of lasting value, absolutely nothing, that I can accomplish apart from abiding in him. Sabbath is a keystone habit that helps me stay connected to Jesus. So work and rest, calibrate well in the rhythm of my life. That's how God uses all of us to change lives. That's true for pastors on staff at Suncrest, and that's true for architects and school teachers and accountants and electricians and plumbers and stay-home moms and restaurant owners and physical therapists and landscapers and even some elected officials around here, all part of this church. Apart from him, we can do nothing of real value. Connected to him, we can make a real difference. We are used by God to change lives. So, much of this comes down to the question, what is a good life? What's a good life? You see, there's my definition and there's God's definition of a good life. A la, it's a wonderful life. There's my perception and the perception of the angels, right? Jesus says, attention to Sabbath is a keystone habit that will absolutely make your life good. Attention to rest every day, every week, every season, every year will make your life work better. Jesus says, I created the universe like this, day and night, spring, summer, fall, winter. This is how the crops work. This is how the planets move. It's my design for plants and animals, and it's my design for you. So I invite you to ask yourself, how could I start a beautiful Sabbath chain reaction in my life in 2019? How could I start a chain reaction that would lead to all kinds of good? My guess is somebody here needs to schedule a vacation, a real vacation. Somebody here could set the boundary and never answer emails, texts, phone calls, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Fleck during a monthly date with your spouse. Haven't heard of Fleck? That's because I just made it up. It's coming, though. Somebody here should get really good at naps. Somebody else should actually go get a job in 2019 and start working 5 or 6 days a week, because you don't need more rest, you need to work. And that's the message for 2019 for you. Someone here could choose family time over overtime, or physical health and peace of mind over another promotion. Maybe your chain reaction begins in 2019, every morning with your favorite coffee, a creamer in there, and a sentence prayer to the God who loves you more than you can imagine. Or maybe there's a new work opportunity with greater responsibility than you've had before, an incredible adventure. And you will absolutely need to stay connected to Jesus so that you can be wonderfully productive in the plans that he has for you. Only he knows what's coming for you. But I encourage you, be intentional. Be specific. Rest well. Work hard. And absolutely step into trusting Jesus to provide for us a beautiful 2019.